In the treacherous courts of Tudor England, where ambition clashed with fate, one woman's wit ignited a king's obsession, only to seal her doom in betrayal and blood. Welcome to the story of Anne Boleyn, a saga of love that reshaped history. Grab a cup of tea, take a seat, and dive in. If you enjoy this tale, subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us. Anne Boleyn's story begins in the quiet beauty of Hever Castle, Kent, around 1501, where she was born into a family hungry for status. Her father, Thomas Boleyn, a cunning diplomat, served both Henry VII and Henry VIII, weaving the Boleyns into the fabric of power. Anne grew up sharp and curious, mastering languages and courtly graces in a world where men held the reins. Her childhood wasn't just games in green meadows. It was a training ground for ambition, shaped by her father's relentless climb. As a teenager, Anne's horizons widened. Sent to the dazzling courts of the Netherlands and France, she served Archduchess Margaret of Austria and Queen Claude of France. There, she soaked up Renaissance elegance, French fashion, music, poetry, and the art of witty conversation. Picture her twirling in vibrant halls, speaking fluent French, debating new ideas like Lutheran reform, her mind as sharp as her style. By 1522, at about 21, she returned to England, joining Henry VIII's court as a maid of honour to Queen Catherine of Aragon. Anne turned heads instantly. Her French gowns, low-cut and bold, and her dark, expressive eyes set her apart from the prim English ladies. She wasn't the Tudor ideal of beauty, slender, olive-skinned, with a pearl choker rumoured to hide a small mole. But her charisma drew poets like Thomas Wyatt, who called her an untamable deer in his verses. Anne navigated the court with care, her intelligence shining in talks of religion and politics, ideas she'd picked up abroad. Unlike her sister Mary, who'd been Henry's mistress and brought the Boleyns favour, but also scandal, Anne refused to be a mere pawn. Her early romance with Henry Percy, heir to Northumberland, showed her heart and her limits. Their secret betrothal promised love, but Cardinal Wolsey, acting on the king's orders, crushed it. This betrayal stung, teaching Anne that love was a dangerous game in a court ruled by power. She rejected a proposed marriage to James Butler, guarding her independence fiercely. Her family's ambitions and her own sharp mind positioned her for something greater and far riskier. For those drawn to Anne's world, seek out her surviving letters. They reveal her bold, strategic voice. Visiting Hever Castle today lets you walk where she grew up, feeling the echoes of her early dreams. Anne's youth forged a woman ready to challenge a king's world, setting the stage for a love that would shake a nation. Henry VIII, the larger-than-life king of England, was a man whose desires could topple empires. By the mid-1520s, his marriage to Catherine of Aragon had soured, producing only one surviving daughter, Mary, and no male heir to secure the Tudor line. Henry, ever the athlete and scholar turned tyrant, grew restless, his eyes wandering the court for distraction. It was in this charged atmosphere that Anne first truly caught his attention, during a masque, or a hunt, perhaps, where her quick laugh and bold opinions stood out like a flame in the fog. Unlike the submissive women around him, Anne challenged him intellectually, debating theology and court gossip with a fire that matched his own. She wasn't just a pretty face. She was a partner in conversation, quoting reformers like Luther and Tyndale, ideas that intrigued a king already questioning the Catholic Church's grip. At first, Henry's interest seemed like another fleeting royal fancy. He'd had mistresses before, including Anne's sister Mary, who bore him children but faded from favour without much fuss. But Anne was different. She refused to become his lover without the promise of something more permanent. Her letters to him, preserved through the ages, reveal a woman playing a high-stakes game, affectionate yet firm, teasing him with lines like, "I beseech you to give an entire answer to this my rude letter, that I may know on what and how far I may depend. Henry, Smitten, bombarded her with gifts, jewels, gowns, even a deer he'd hunted himself, symbolizing his pursuit of the wild deer Wyatt had poeticized. He wrote her passionate letters, signing them H.R. for Henry Rex, declaring his heart pierced by her. One surviving missive shows his frustration. "I would you were in my arms, or I in yours, for I think it long since I kissed you." Anne's responses were calculated, keeping him at arm's length while stoking his obsession. This courtship unfolded against a backdrop of mounting tension. Catherine, the devout Spanish queen, sensed the threat, but clung to her position, supported by her nephew, Emperor Charles V, whose armies loomed over Europe. Henry, desperate for an annulment, dubbed it the King's Great Matter. He argued their marriage violated biblical law. Catherine had been his brother Arthur's widow, and Leviticus forbade such unions. But Pope Clement VII, under Charles's influence after the sack of Rome in 1527, dragged his feet, fearing imperial wrath. Henry turned to his chancellor, Cardinal Wolsey, to broker the divorce. But Wolsey's efforts faltered at a legatine court in 1529, where Catherine dramatically knelt before Henry, pleading her case and winning public sympathy. Anne, watching from the shadows, grew impatient, blaming Wolsey for the delays and whispering in Henry's ear about the cardinal's divided loyalties. As the years dragged on, from 1527 to 1533, Anne's influence deepened. She introduced Henry to radical texts, like Simon Fisher's A Supplication for the Beggars, which criticized the church's wealth and corruption. These ideas fueled Henry's break from Rome, a seismic shift that would birth the Church of England. In secret, Anne and Henry shared intimate moments at her family homes, like Hever and the newly gifted Hampton Court, where they plotted and dreamed. But Anne faced backlash. Courtiers called her the concubine, or worse, accusing her of witchcraft for enchanting the king. Her Protestant leanings alienated conservatives, while her sharp tongue made enemies, men like Thomas More, who resigned as Chancellor in 1532 over Henry's supremacy over the Church. Practical whispers of history here. If you're tracing this era, look to the Vatican archives for Henry's love letters, hidden there after being smuggled out, or explore Hampton Court Palace, where ghosts of their stolen kisses linger in the tapestried halls. Anne's strategy paid off when, in 1532, she finally yielded to Henry, likely becoming pregnant soon after. This forced his hand. He secretly married her in January 1533, bigamously at first, while still wed to Catherine. Thomas Cranmer, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, annulled the old marriage in May, crowning Anne Queen in a lavish coronation at Westminster Abbey. She processed through London in a litter of white cloth of gold, but the crowds were sullen, muttering Nan Bullen instead of cheering. Yet Anne, 6 months pregnant, radiated triumph. Her motto, "The most happy," emblazoned everywhere. Henry's obsession transformed England. The Act of Supremacy in 1534 made him head of the church, dissolving monasteries to fund his coffers and crush dissent. Executions followed. Fisher and More beheaded for refusing the oath of succession, which recognized Anne's children as heirs. Anne herself navigated this power precariously. She advocated for reform, distributing Bibles in English and supporting scholars like Hugh Latimer. But her position was fragile, dependent on producing a son. In September 1533, she gave birth, not to the longed-for prince, but to a daughter, Elizabeth, a red-haired girl who would one day rule. Henry masked his disappointment, but cracks appeared. Anne suffered miscarriages in 1534 and 1536, the latter coinciding with Catherine's death, removing the last barrier to legitimacy, but heightening pressure for a male heir. Court life buzzed with intrigue. Anne surrounded herself with allies, her brother George, Viscount Rochford, a dashing diplomat, her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, ambitious and ruthless, and musicians like Mark Smeaton, whose talents entertained but later doomed. She clashed with Henry's advisor, Thomas Cromwell, initially an ally in the Reformation, but increasingly a rival as he eyed monastery wealth. Rumours swirled. Anne's alleged flirtations, perhaps innocent courtly games, fed jealousy. Henry, now in his 40s, grew portly and temperamental after a 1536 jousting accident left him with a festering leg wound, souring his mood and fertility hopes for history buffs. Dive into ambassadors' dispatches, like those from Eustace Chapuis, the imperial envoy who despised Anne and chronicled her every move with bias. Visiting the Tower of London evokes the era's brutality, where traitors met their end on Tower Green. Anne's queenship was a whirlwind of patronage. She funded education for the poor, reformed court morals by banishing gambling, and even designed her own badge, a crowned falcon, symbolizing her rise. But beneath the glamour lay fear. She knew Henry's love could turn to hate, as it had for Catherine. As tensions simmered, whispers of betrayal began to circle. In early 1536, Henry eyed Jane Seymour, a meek lady-in-waiting whose pale demeanour contrasted Anne's fire. Anne confronted him, but her outbursts only alienated. A final miscarriage in January, on the day of Catherine's funeral, sealed doubts. Henry lamented the child as a boy lost, muttering that his marriage was cursed. Cromwell, sensing opportunity, began gathering evidence of Anne's infidelity, twisting innocent interactions into treason. The stage was set for a fall as swift as her rise, driven by politics, personal vendettas, and a king's wandering eye. This period of passion and power reshaped not just a marriage, but a kingdom, birthing religious reform amid heartache. Yet the very forces Anne unleashed would soon consume her, leading to accusations that shocked the realm. The crown sat heavy on Anne Boleyn's head, its weight matched only by the growing storm around her. By 1536, her position as queen, once a dazzling triumph, teetered on a knife's edge. The court, a glittering cage of ambition and envy, buzzed with whispers that threatened to unravel everything she'd built. Anne had reshaped England alongside Henry VIII, but her failure to produce a male heir gnawed at the king's patience. The birth of Princess Elizabeth in 1533 had been a bittersweet victory, and subsequent miscarriages, especially the devastating loss in January 1536, cast a shadow over her queenship. Henry's love, once fervent, cooled as his gaze drifted to Jane Seymour, a quiet, fair-haired lady-in-waiting whose demure nature seemed a deliberate contrast to Anne's boldness. The court sensed weakness, and predators began to circle. Anne's daily life as queen was a whirlwind of duty and defiance. She presided over banquets and masques, her sharp wit and French flair still captivating. But the adoration of earlier years waned. Her coronation splendour was a fading memory. Londoners who once grudgingly accepted her now openly scorned her, calling her the king's mistress rather than his wife. Yet Anne pressed on, using her influence to champion the English Bible and fund scholars, her Protestant leanings evident in her patronage of reformist preachers. She gifted Henry a jewelled locket with her portrait, a reminder of their bond, but his heart was slipping away. Jane Seymour, placed strategically by her ambitious family, hovered at court, her modesty a silent rebuke to Anne's fiery spirit. Anne's outbursts against Jane, once publicly ordering her to leave the king's side, only deepened Henry's irritation, painting Anne as shrewish in his eyes. The political landscape grew treacherous. Thomas Cromwell, once her ally in breaking Rome's hold, turned foe as their goals diverged. Anne wanted monastic wealth redirected to charity and education. Cromwell saw it as a windfall for the crown and his own coffers. He began weaving a web of intrigue, exploiting Anne's enemies, nobles like the Duke of Suffolk, who resented her influence, and courtiers who whispered of her sharp tongue. Her brother George, ever loyal, stood by her, but his own brash charm made him a target. Even her musicians, like the talented Mark Smeaton, became pawns in the brewing plot. Courtly flirtations, once harmless in the chivalric games of the day, were twisted into dangerous rumours. Ambassador Eustace Chapuis, loyal to Catherine and Mary, fanned these flames, reporting every misstep to the emperor with venomous glee. In April 1536, the trap snapped shut. Cromwell, sensing Henry's discontent and eager to secure his own power, orchestrated a devastating accusation. Anne was charged with adultery, treason, and even incest with her brother George. The evidence was flimsy: overheard jests, misinterpreted glances, and coerced confessions. Mark Smeaton, tortured or pressured, admitted to an affair with the Queen, a claim likely false but damning. Other courtiers, Henry Norris, William Brereton, Francis Weston, were swept up in the net, accused of being her lovers. George Boleyn's inclusion was particularly shocking. The charge of incest, based on vague gossip about their closeness, horrified the court, but served to taint Anne's name beyond repair. On May 2nd, Anne was arrested during a tennis match, her laughter cut short as guards escorted her to the Tower of London. The same day, George and the others followed, their fates sealed by Cromwell's machinations. Inside the Tower, Anne faced a nightmare. Confined in the same royal apartments where she'd prepared for her coronation, she oscillated between defiance and despair. Her letters from this time, if genuine, show a woman pleading her innocence. "Try me, good king, but let me have a lawful trial." But Henry, wounded by her miscarriages and swayed by Cromwell's proof, refused to see her. The trial on May 15th was a sham. Presided over by her uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, the court heard lurid tales of Anne's alleged affairs, with dates and details so inconsistent they defied logic. Some accusations placed her with lovers when she was visibly pregnant or recovering from childbirth. Yet the verdict was preordained, guilty. George and the others faced the same fate, their execution swift on May 17th. Anne watched from her cell as her brother's head fell, her resolve tested by grief. For those seeking to uncover this dark chapter, the Tower's records and contemporary accounts, like those of chronicler Edward Hall, reveal the trial's haste and bias. Visiting the Tower today, you can stand where Anne awaited her fate, the cold stone echoing her final days. Her faith sustained her. She prayed with her almoner and distributed alms, clinging to dignity. Rumours of her joking about her little neck to the constable show her gallows humour, a flicker of the wit that once won a king. Henry, meanwhile, prepared to wed Jane Seymour, his annulment of Anne's marriage already in motion, branding Elizabeth a bastard. The accusations against Anne were less about truth and more about power. Cromwell needed her gone to secure his influence, and Jane's faction needed a new queen. Henry, humiliated by whispers of cuckoldry, saw her death as a way to erase his mistake. On May 19, 1536, Anne faced the scaffold on Tower Green, not with an axe, but a French swordsman, a small mercy she'd requested. Dressed in grey damask, she addressed the crowd. "I am come hither to die, for according to the law, I am judged to die." Her final words blessed the king, a diplomatic plea to protect her daughter. The sword fell swiftly, ending the life of a woman who'd ignited a revolution in love and faith. Anne's fall was a stark lesson in the fragility of power. Her enemies triumphed, but the seeds she planted, reform, Elizabeth's future, would outlast them. The court moved on, but the echoes of her trial lingered, a warning of how quickly love could turn to betrayal in a world ruled by ambition. Henry V wasted no time burying the past. Just 11 days after Anne Boleyn's head rolled on Tower Green, on May 30th, 1536, he wed Jane Seymour in a quiet ceremony at York Place, now Whitehall Palace. The contrast could not have been starker. Jane, at 27, embodied the virtues Anne lacked in Henry's eyes: pale, plump, and pious, with a demeanour as soft as fresh cream. She wore a simple gown of yellow satin, her motto, "Bound to obey and serve," embroidered in gold, a direct jab at Anne's independence. The court, still reeling from the executions, fell into line. Cromwell orchestrated the pageantry, distributing arms in Jane's name to win public favour, while ballads praised her as the rose without a thorn. Henry, elated, showered her with gifts, a diamond-encrusted falcon badge repurposed from Anne's own, and declared her his true wife from the start. Jane's queenship unfolded with calculated caution. She avoided Anne's bold reforms, focusing instead on reconciliation. Her first act was to plead for Princess Mary, Anne's longtime rival, who had been stripped of her title and confined at Hatfield. Mary, now 20, had watched her mother's humiliation and Anne's rise with bitter silence, refusing the oath that denied Catherine's marriage. But Jane, playing the peacemaker, sent gifts and letters coaxing Mary to submit. In June 1536, Mary capitulated, signing a humiliating document affirming Henry's supremacy and her own illegitimacy. Henry, moved by sentiment or strategy, forgave her, restoring her to court as Lady Mary and granting her a household. The sisters, Mary and the 2-year-old Elizabeth, were kept apart, but Jane's mediation softened the edges of old wounds, earning her quiet acclaim. At the heart of it all was the desperate quest for a son. Jane conceived quickly, her pregnancy announced amid feasts and tournaments. The court buzzed with hope. Henry fasted and prayed, commissioning masses for a safe delivery. Anne's daughter Elizabeth, now demoted to Lady Elizabeth and declared illegitimate by Parliament's Act of Succession, faded into obscurity. At 2, she lived at Hunsdon House under nurses, her once lavish wardrobe sold off. Servants reported her precocious nature, speaking French fluently, dancing with grace, but her status mirrored her mother's fall. Henry visited sporadically, his affection inconsistent, one day gifting her a jewelled rattle, the next ignoring her existence. Elizabeth's household dwindled, her governess Lady Bryan pleading for funds in desperate letters. "I know not where to borrow money to pay the servants their wages." Cromwell, the architect of Anne's doom, rose higher on this wave. Knighted Earl of Essex, he controlled the dissolution of monasteries, funneling vast wealth, over £1 million, to the crown. Abbeys like Glastonbury fell, their lead roofs melted for bullets, libraries burned and relics scattered. Cromwell built alliances with German princes, eyeing a Protestant match for Edward, but his ambition bred enemies. The conservative faction, led by the Duke of Norfolk, chafed at his power. Jane, though gentle, aligned with traditionalists, her family, the Seymours, gaining lands from dissolved houses. Court life under her rule was subdued. No French fashions or reformist sermons, just embroidery circles and pious readings. Henry, healthier after Anne's drama, jousted and hunted, his leg ulcer managed by new physicians. As autumn 1537 approached, anticipation peaked. Jane went into labour on October 9th at Hampton Court, her cries echoing through the red brick halls. After 3 agonising days, on October 12th, Prince Edward was born, a healthy, fair-haired boy with his father's blue eyes. Cannons roared from the tower, bonfires blazed across England, and church bells pealed for weeks. Henry wept with joy, knighted the midwives, and showered the realm with wine. Edward's christening on October 15th was a spectacle, carried on a silver font under a canopy of velvet, with Mary as godmother and Elizabeth, aged 3, as a secondary sponsor. For the first time the Tudor line seemed secure, male heir in hand, daughters reconciled. But triumph turned to tragedy. Jane's labours had torn her, fever set in, her body swelling with infection. Physicians bled her and applied poultices, but sepsis spread. On October 24th, after 12 days of delirium, she died at 29, whispering farewells to Henry. He was devastated, shutting himself away for weeks, clad in black. Jane's embalmed body lay in state, her funeral a sombre affair at St. George's Chapel, Windsor. Henry vowed eternal devotion, burying her beside him in a vault meant for eternity. No other wife would join them. The nation mourned genuinely. Jane had delivered the prince and died a martyr queen. Grief reshaped the court. Edward, fragile in infancy, was swaddled in luxury at Hatfield, tended by 200 servants. Henry, now 46 and widowed again, turned to governance with renewed vigour. Parliament revoked the Treason Acts against Anne's lovers, restoring their properties to families, a tacit admission of the charge's flimsiness. Cromwell pushed radical reforms, English liturgies, clerical marriage, but overreached. In 1539, the Act of 6 Articles reaffirmed Catholic doctrines, bowing to conservative pressure after fears of invasion. Anne's Protestant allies scattered. Some fled to the continent, carrying her memory. Elizabeth's childhood darkened further. With Jane gone, her household shrank to peril. Lady Bryan begged Cromwell for aid, noting the child's thin clothes and empty pantry. At 4, Elizabeth wrote her first letter to Henry, a childish scrawl in Latin, pleading to visit court. He relented occasionally, parading her at Christmas 1538, where she dazzled with recitations. But whispers of her mother's crimes haunted her. Servants gossiped, and Mary, now favoured, treated her coolly. Elizabeth learned resilience early, stitching her own smocks and studying under tutors like William Grindal, who taught her classics and scripture, subjects Anne had loved. Cromwell's star waned as swiftly as it rose. Henry, seeking a new queen to secure alliances, heeded Cromwell's push for Anne of Cleves, sister of a German duke. The 1540 marriage was a disaster. Henry, repulsed by her plain features and sturdy build, called her the Flanders mare after a fumbling meeting. He annulled it after 6 months, blaming Cromwell for the mismatch. Norfolk and his allies struck. Cromwell was arrested at a council meeting, charged with treason and heresy. His vast networks, spies, bribes, even rumoured Lutheran sympathies, sealed his fate. On July 28, 1540, he mounted the scaffold at Tower Hill, his head striking the block after a botched swing. Henry watched from afar, perhaps regretting the loss of his most able servant. The Seymours capitalised on Cromwell's fall. Edward Seymour, Jane's brother, became Duke of Somerset and protector for the young prince. They steered England toward moderate Protestantism, echoing Anne's influence indirectly. Henry wed Catherine Howard, a frivolous Norfolk niece, in a bid for youth, but her infidelities led to her execution in 1542, another beheading on Tower Green, where Anne had died. Elizabeth, now 9, witnessed the court's volatility. Catherine's fall reminded her of her mother's, prompting a famous exchange when questioned about her legitimacy. "I am my father's daughter." Henry's later years brought more upheaval. Wed to Catherine Parr in 1543, a scholarly widow who reunited the family, he finally restored Mary and Elizabeth to the succession line, though still illegitimate. Elizabeth, at 8, rejoined court, her wit shining in debates with her stepmother. But plots swirled. Conservatives eyed the throne, radicals pushed reform. Henry's health declined. Obesity, ulcers, and paranoia led to 72,000 executions over his reign. In January 1547, he died at 55, his last words commending Edward to Somerset. Young Edward's reign began promisingly under regents, but his frailty and Protestant zeal sowed discord. Elizabeth, shuttled between households, studied diligently, her necklace, a falcon pendant from Anne, her sole link to the past. Mary's staunch Catholicism clashed with Edward's reforms, but the siblings shared a bond forged in neglect. When Edward died in 1553 at 15, poisoned perhaps by overzealous medicine, Lady Jane Grey, Seymour kin, was proclaimed queen for 9 days. Mary triumphed, restoring Catholicism, but spared Elizabeth despite Wyatt's rebellion linking them. Elizabeth's path to power was paved by survival. At 20, she endured imprisonment in the Tower under Mary, accused of treason but released through cunning denials. Mary's death in 1558 elevated Elizabeth to the throne. her coronation echoing Anne's, white and gold, with cheers this time. She ruled 44 years as the Virgin Queen, her motto, Semper Idem, masking the scars of betrayal. Anne's shadow loomed large in these shifts. Her execution cleared Cromwell's path, only for him to follow. Jane's success birthed Edward, whose short reign undid much of Henry's work. Elizabeth's genius redeemed her mother's name. The Reformation. Anne ignited endured. Monastery wealth funded navy and learning. English Bibles spread literacy. Chroniclers like John Foxe hailed her as a martyr in his Book of Martyrs, preserving her letters and portraying her fall as Catholic malice. For seekers of this era's truths, pore over state papers in the British Library, where Cromwell's ledgers detail seized wealth, or visit Windsor for Jane's tomb. Hampton Court's Great Hall hosts ghostly echoes of christenings and farewells. Artifacts like Elizabeth's coronation ring, engraved with mother and daughter conjoined, symbolize unbroken legacy. Yet amid restoration and revenge, one truth persisted. Anne's love had forged an empire. Her betrayal birthed its greatest queen. The Tudor saga closed with Elizabeth's glory, but questions lingered. Did Henry ever regret the blade that severed his obsession? Elizabeth I, crowned in 1558 at 25, stepped into a fractured England, her mother's shadow trailing her like a half-forgotten dream. Anne Boleyn's execution, Jane Seymour's triumph, Cromwell's fall, and the turbulent reigns of Edward and Mary had left the kingdom scarred. Religiously divided, financially drained, and wary of a young queen with a tarnished lineage. Yet Elizabeth, with her mother's wit and her father's commanding presence, would weave these threads of tragedy into a golden age. Her reign was not just a personal victory, but the ultimate vindication of Anne's legacy, revealing the full arc of love, power, and betrayal that reshaped a nation. As she donned her coronation robes, white and gold, echoing Anne's in 1533, the whispers of Nan Boleyn's daughter gave way to cheers for a queen who would defy the odds. Elizabeth inherited a realm on the brink. Mary's Catholic restoration had burned 280 Protestants, earning her the moniker Bloody Mary in Fox's martyrologies, while Spain's Philip II, her widower, eyed England as a prize. The treasury was bled dry from wars and inflation. Nobles like the Dudleys and Howards jostled for dominance. Elizabeth, declared illegitimate until Henry's final act, faced skepticism. Could a woman, let alone one tied to Anne's scandal, hold the throne? Her education, Latin, Greek, mathematics, and history, under tutors like Roger Ascham, armed her with intellect. She spoke 5 languages, penned poetry, and studied Machiavelli, learning to navigate treachery with Anne's cunning. Her appearance mirrored her mother's. Red gold hair, sharp cheekbones, and dark eyes that could charm or pierce. A locket ring, worn secretly, held Anne's miniature, a talisman of resilience. Her first act was to balance faith. Anne's Protestant spark had grown into a smouldering divide. Elizabeth crafted the Elizabethan settlement, blending Protestant doctrine with Catholic trappings, English Bibles and simplified masses, to appease both sides. The 1559 Act of Supremacy named her Supreme Governor of the Church, a softer title than Henry's, sidestepping papal fury. Bishops resisted. She replaced them with moderates like Matthew Parker, who revered Anne's reformist zeal. Yet Catholics plotted. Mary, Queen of Scots, her cousin, claimed the throne with French backing. Elizabeth, wary of marriage after her parents' saga, refused suitors like Philip II and Robert Dudley, her rumoured love. "I am married to England," she declared, her virginity a political shield, echoing Anne's strategic independence. The court glittered under her command. Greenwich and Whitehall buzzed with masks, where Elizabeth danced in silks embroidered with falcons, her mother's badge reclaimed. She patronised poets like Spenser, whose fairy queen veiled her as Gloriana, and explorers like Drake, who raided Spanish ships, filling her coffers. Her Privy Council, William Cecil, her steady advisor, and Francis Walsingham, her spymaster, thwarted assassination plots. The 1570 papal bull excommunicating her sparked rebellion. Northern earls rose, only to be crushed, their heads spiked on London Bridge. Elizabeth's speeches rallied loyalty, like her 1588 address at Tilbury. "I have the heart and stomach of a king," she proclaimed, facing the Spanish Armada's 130 ships. England's navy, funded by monastery wealth Anne's reforms had unlocked, sank the fleet, cementing her as a warrior queen. Yet betrayal lurked, as it had for her mother. Mary Stuart, imprisoned in England, posed a constant threat. In 1587, after 19 years of plots, Elizabeth signed her death warrant, weeping publicly but resolute. The execution, overseen by Cecil, mirrored Anne's swift trial, justice as strategy. Elizabeth's reluctance reflected her mother's fate. She knew how quickly loyalty could turn. Her court was a chessboard. Dudley's flirtations tested her heart, but she never yielded, fearing a consort's power. Her private pains surfaced in letters, where she mourned her isolation, yet her public face was iron. Anne's daughter, never broken. The Boleyn legacy permeated her rule. Anne's push for English scriptures shaped Elizabeth's church. Her daughter's reign saw literacy soar, with over half the population reading by 1603. Anne's falcon badge adorned Elizabeth's banners, a quiet tribute. The Reformation's wealth, monasteries turned to schools and shipyards, built the navy that crushed Spain. Elizabeth's scholars, like John Dee, echoed Anne's patronage of learning. Visiting her mother's Hever Castle, now a Seymour estate, Elizabeth reportedly touched Anne's prayer book, her fingers tracing the faded initials AB. She never spoke of her mother publicly, but her policies, reform, exploration, arts, fulfilled Anne's vision. By 1603, Elizabeth's health faded. Smallpox scars and lead makeup aged her at 69. Childless, she named James VI of Scotland, Mary Stuart's son, as heir, uniting the Isles. Her death on March 24th marked the end of the Tudors, but her 44-year reign left England a global power. Chroniclers like Camden called it the Golden Age. Stability, prosperity, Shakespeare's plays. Anne's tragedy, love turned to betrayal, birthed this queen, whose resilience answered Henry's cruelty. Did he regret Anne's death? His silence in later years, and Elizabeth's rise, suggest a bitter truth. His obsession cost him his greatest legacy. For history seekers, explore the National Archives for Elizabeth's letters, sharp with wit, or visit Westminster Abbey, where she lies near Mary, reconciled in death. The Armada portrait at Greenwich captures her majesty, Anne's eyes staring through time. If this tale of love and power gripped you, grab a cup of tea, subscribe to our channel, and comment your thoughts below. Your support means the world.